Hello once again.
There you are.
Yep.
Hi.
Hey, how are ya?
I'm good. Better now that I ate lunch.
Yes, I know.
I had not eaten at all earlier, and I was like, I'm getting hungry.
Oh, wow. I had eaten twice before lunch, and I was still hungry. I have to
that's
eat every
funny.
couple hours. I'm just weird like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've been trying different approaches, and so, I was hungry.
Yeah, I'm sure. I bet you and Ginny are really tired too.
I'm not too bad. Well, I'm just generally tired. In fact, I have to read y'all this funny thing that somebody sent me last night. It says, I am not an early bird or a night owl. I am some form of permanently exhausted pigeon.
That is definitely me.
So I'm like, yes, that's me. I am tired, but I'm always
Exactly. I know. I'm always tired too.
Well, you both seem to go at all day and all night. What you do?
Yeah, it's a lot. But when we had our exchange student, he would say, Aunt April, you're always tired. I'm like, yes, I
am. I know. Yeah. Well, that's true.
So
is it just the three of us for this one?
I think so.
Okay. All righty.
We're good.
Good. Okay, well, I will put you on spotlight then, Ginny.
Oh my gosh.
And I will mute myself.
Okay.
So,
oops.
I don't have a very
that's okay. That's okay.
Great room, but
the important thing is you. And this is up for discussion. Not my decision, but Ginny, I don't know if you just want this interview for your own records, or if you want to add it to the project that we're working on, the NMRLS project. So, that's just a consideration. It could be a bit more informal if you don't want it to go as part of the official project, or if you want it to be part of that project, then we can, make it more formal, which I'm happy. I can go ahead and do the formal intro and stuff anyway, just in case.
Yeah, there might be, let's say, a quote that you would want to put in a video, and would it need to be part of the formal project for that or not?
I don't know, but let's just go ahead and we'll proceed as a formal part of the project.
Okay.
Okay. So this is April Grayson in Oxford, Mississippi, interviewing Catherine Ginny Kilgore on July 17, 2020. We are using Zoom and are in remote locations because we are in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And so this is a supplemental interview to one done in 2019 with Ginny about her experiences at the North Mississippi Rural Legal Services. So Ginny, I know that we've covered a lot already, and so I want to focus on some of the issues that you yourself have raised as needing to be captured. And so where would you like to start?
I think the summer project that we're working on is to develop the untold stories of the women who were instrumental in the development of North Mississippi Rural Legal Services. And we have had some discussion today in the other interviews and also in the past, and just wanted to make sure that we can add to that picture so that some of those untold stories are told, so to speak.
So,
And well,
no, you go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
one person that we talked about in the beginning with Ben Cole and with Marion Tudor was Mildred Quarles. And I'd like to go discuss Mildred again in this interview. Mildred traveled with me for about 20 years when I was the Elder Law Project Director. And she was described in one of the videos, I thought pretty accurately, as sort of trying to think of the term, in a political campaign, it would be, they might call it the front person, the person who would go in and kind of get things going for the candidate when they came in. And my brother used to do that when he was a young man in Indiana with a fellow named Birch By, who was an old style Democrat. And he ran against Richard Lugar at one point and lost. And both of them were against senators, I think, in their way. And they, but it's the person that goes in and sort of personalizes the situation. And I think that was described well, that Mildred Quarles that was part of what she did with the Elder Law Project. When we would go, we started the tradition they have now of continuing to do a lot of outreach. And even though we are at this point in the pandemic and outreach events are not occurring like they have been throughout the whole time of NMRLS. Hopefully it will come about again. But Miss Quarles would go with us, and she would pass out materials, try to find out what problems people have. And it was described accurately, particularly that elderly people are not as likely to come forward with their legal problem. You know, you can try to find out even how power of attorney, a fairly simple document, the way it's done at legal services, how it should be set up. And you have to find out the hidden family problems of why a certain person should not be the agent under the power of attorney. And you can't just do that with a 10-minute interview, fill out the form. You could do the document on the computer, you know, in 3 minutes. But you know, if you got the wrong name in there, there could be elder abuse, elder exploitation. It's going to be a terrible situation after the person leaves. And to get that essential piece of information that the person who's sitting out there waiting for your client to come back so they can drive them home is not the person who needs to be the agent. It needs to be someone else. And to get that person to come forward with that information, that was part of what Ms. Quarles and other non-attorneys who worked with the program were often very skilled at doing, and often those were women. And the thing that got me started on this summer project was a book called Women and Justice for the Poor, A History of Legal Aid, 1863 to 1945, by Felice Batlin, Batlan. And she talked about the development of legal public interest law, legal services, legal aid up in the Northeast, and the role of women as advocates and how important it was. And even though the grassroots advocates in Mississippi came about in a different way than in the Northeast part of the country, still, I think the premise of what the author had to say is true here, and that is that there's a rich untold story of the women who were the some of the founders and major contributors to legal services development in this state. And part of the reason for that, I think, is often the story is told by the male actors, by the people who wrote the articles may have missed some of the importance of the women who were involved. One of the other things that got me to thinking about this was in Oxford for a few years, there was a sort of an informal meeting that would change the bar we would go to of women in the law in Oxford. And I think Magistrate Judge Alexander would go, myself, Ava Jackson was the director of NMRLS at the time. She usually went. And Nina Tollison, who later became the executive director or the president of the Mississippi Bar Association. Nina is from Oxford. And I remember at a meeting that she was talking, and she related one time that she was talking to her mother, and she realized that her mother didn't know a whole lot about her career. And we got to talking about how women really don't often talk about what they've accomplished. And so I worked with people at Legal Services who were great advocates and major part in the development of access to justice in Mississippi. And some of them were like Mildred Quarles, who were not attorneys, not even employees at the program, but who was one of the major actors who made the program come into existence. And so I wanted to, through the interviews we did this summer, start bringing out some of that history, and so that it wouldn't be lost at this point in time to the history of this state. And speaking a little more about Mildred, she was this was before my time with Legal Services, but I've heard a lot about it. And she was she and Robert Earl Quarles, her son, were the plaintiffs in the Oxford school case. And that's been talked about a lot, the desegregation case. But she was quoted in the newspaper one time that about that, and she just in the Oxford Eagle, and she said that she just wanted her children to have have an equal chance at an education. And she talked about the community at large without the thing about Mildred, there was not a bitterness about Mildred. She was she had a good outlook toward everyone in the community, and she wanted uh, equal educational opportunities for all. And she just reached out and tried to help everyone in whatever activity she was involved in, whether it be the school case or later in her career, the providing service for the elderly, the sick, the disabled, people who were frail and isolated out in the community. And she would always bring the person in need to the office, whether you had time to see them or not. And, she would make enough of a fuss that somebody would see the person. She would, I can recall her being in the hallway saying, "This person needs help." And she would loud talk until somebody helped that person. So, and it wouldn't matter if it was me or the executive director or whoever. So she was very strong advocate and in ways that mattered, in ways that ended up getting results for people, and a good identifier of issues, I guess. That in law school, you're supposed to, one of the things you have to learn how to do is figure out, is there something here that a lawyer can help fix, an issue. And she took the approach of, I guess, I've heard Clarence Darrow approach, that, you've got the problem and you find the law to fix it, and that was her approach, and it helped a lot of people.
Great, thank you. When we spoke with Ben Cole earlier, he mentioned some other names, and so I wanted to ask you if you knew or worked with any of them, that maybe you have reflections on them. I didn't catch all of the names exactly. One of them was Macy Wooten.
She was before my time.
Okay. And then there were a few from other areas, like he mentioned a Mrs. Matthews.
No, I wasn't familiar with that person either. Okay. I think I recall the person from Corinth.
Mrs. Hampton?
Yes, Miss Laura Hampton. She was on the board, and she was very vocal at the board meetings, and did bring many of the community issues to the North Mississippi Rural Legal Services board. And she had a presence about her, just like Miss Quarles did. She would rise, and she always would announce herself, Laura Hampton, Corinth, Mississippi. And, then she would say her piece, so to speak, about what the issue was. And I found this, she would really keep your attention. She was an orator, and so kind of, and usually what she was concerned about was a weighty and valid issue. And it might just be that many people in the area don't have a will, and people are losing their family land because there's no will, and the family is fighting among themselves, and some of the heirs can't be found, so that somebody is able to come, sort of a vulture for the community to get the land out from the family. And so she would notice issues like that, and she would bring them to the board. And then it would come to, if I wasn't at the meeting and I was the elder law project director, the director of the program, or the litigation director would talk with me about going up there and doing an outreach to get Miss Hampton involved, and we would set up an outreach. And they had a senior center up there called the Bishop Center, and we would go there and see clients. And this was kind of in the beginning of the Elder Law Project, and so we worked really closely with those community activists, such as Miss Laura Hampton. And there were others that Ben didn't mention, who were also people, it's difficult to describe, but like Miss Quarles or Laura Hampton, and then others who were not necessarily on the board or might have been on the advisory board, who had that same presence about them. I think I can recall somebody, I think her name might have been Susie Alford, who had a relative, maybe a grandson, who had been expelled from school. I'll give you another example of this type of person. And I was not the attorney on that case, but I believe I was in the courtroom. And there was testimony put on that a school official's son had committed the same school infraction that Miss Alford's relative did, and was not expelled. And the federal judge, I think it was Judge Cady, ruled in favor of Miss Alford. But in the process of the case going on, Miss Alford got started talking about it, and the county attorney was trying to move the case on and trying to get her to be more succinct. And finally, the Judge Cady just told him to sit down and said, Miss Alford has something to say, and there's nothing that's going to prevent that. So you may as well sit down and let's hear her story, more or less. And so it was impressive even to I guess Judge Cady was considered one of the five best federal judges in the nation. He was top of the line, and he was impressed. And these were the type of people that had that response, and this is, I guess, why they were the go-to people in the community. They were the people that if they were intimidated by going to a lawyer, they felt like they could go to Miss Quarles or even Susie Alford and get maybe make the trip down to legal services with them, and that would kind of take the fear of entering the system away from the situation.
And was Miss Alford, was she from Oxford or from somewhere else?
She was from Oxford.
Okay.
Yeah, she was. And these people also worked quite often, not just with me, but the other lawyers. Ms. Quarles was a friend and also often or sometimes a plaintiff or a client of Alvin Chambliss. But I think one of the distinctions that one of the things that I think is true of her and the other community activists around in Mississippi was that they were people who they were not just pawns in the litigation. They were in charge of the litigation. I think I've forgotten what the exactly was said, but there was something that was written by let's see, in a book called Rationing Justice, and there was a discussion of the lawyers following the clients, the civil rights advocates into court, following them with their issues and being their instruments to get something done. And these were very strong individuals, strong in their convictions. They understood what needed to be done in the community, and they did their part, to get it done.
Great. May I read a couple of other names and see if you have any experience with them?
Sure.
So he also mentioned Dora Adams, who he thought was based in West Point. Did you know her?
I vaguely remember Miss Adams. She was, I think she passed away during my early years at Legal Services. So I don't recall too much about her. I do know they have named the public benefits project out of the West Point area after Miss Adams. And I think she was very active in the early years.
Great. And what about Catherine Parrish?
I don't recall her. In the early years, I was the managing attorney in Oxford, and we served 5 counties. And I wasn't as knowledgeable about the entire service area as I was later when I became the Elder Law Project Director and served all 39 counties.
And what about Gloria Green?
Gloria, well, I remember she was the managing attorney at one point in the Greenville office, and later I interacted with Gloria when she was the director of the Disability Determination Service, part of the state government. This is the service that decides Social Security disability cases at the stage before it goes to the administrative law judge. And at that point, it goes in the ALJs are employed by the Social Security Administration. But at the earlier stages of the decision making, the state agency makes a decision about whether someone is disabled or not. And that service has other functions as well, but that's how I came into contact with her. It was during a time when the law had, we were working as a coalition with the other legal services offices in the state and trying to interact with the state agency to find out why Mississippi was like last in the nation in the percentage of child disability cases that were allowed. Every other state had a higher percentage of children who had applied for benefits and received them. Mississippi was last. So with the health problems and the poverty in this state, the feeling was that there were some deficits. And when Gloria Green, and worked with the coalition in the state of child advocates, we ultimately got the system, had a seat at the table to have a voice for the children. And we got as far as being about midpoint in the allowance rate in the state, in the country. When we started out, we were last in the nation. So she was instrumental in helping that agency increase its effectiveness, I think.
That's great. And then he called the name of Maudine someone, but I didn't catch the last name. Did you know?
Edford. I think it was like ECKFORD, Maudine Edford.
Okay.
And I believe that's correct. Maudine, I did not work with her when she was at NMRLS, but I believe that she went on to work at East Mississippi Legal Services out of Meridian, and then later she worked. I think this is correct, at the for the Mississippi Attorney General's office, and I remember interacting with her through the years. She was a great lawyer. I don't know what she's doing now.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also wanted to go back to Dr. Tudor's interview, and just see if you had any other follow-ups to some of the things that she talked about with the elder law program, and any anecdotes that you wanted to share in particular about that.
Well, Dr. Tudor came in the mid-90s. The Elder Law Project started, I believe, in 1985, and I was asked by the director at Legal Services at the time to attend a meeting in Jackson. And I believe what had happened was the federal agency at that point was the Administration on Aging. And they they were probably, I'm just guessing at this because I wasn't behind the scenes at the state agency or privy to anything, but I believe that they were moving to try to get the legal assistance program that is funded by the federal agency and that comes through the state agency, Department of Human Services, Division of Aging and Adult Services, to partner with the legal services programs in the state to provide the legal assistance component to that funding. And that funding is often called the Older Americans Act funding. It funds Meals on Wheels and senior centers and transportation and lots of services for people, older people. And so there was a meeting in Jackson in a group called the Center for Social Gerontology out of Michigan, sent a couple people, one of whom was Penny Hummel, was one of the trainers. And what I believe it was called something along the lines of the Ombudsman program having a meeting with the legal services. And the Ombudsman program is part of the Division of Aging and Adult Services programs, part of the elder programs. And the Ombudsman are social workers who provide, are advocates for the elderly and for the elderly people's families or caregivers who are in nursing homes, personal care homes, hospitals, any kind of institutional care. So the program is called the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. And that is one of the main parts of the aging funding. And so we had the meeting. It was, and I went from North Mississippi Rural Legal Services. And that's the first time that I remember that that connection being made with the Division of Aging. I think Eddie Anderson was the director of Division of Aging and Division of Aging and Adult Services. And he was instrumental, I think, in getting the legal services throughout the state to take over the delivery of the legal assistance component of the Older Americans Act programs. So we went from there to the director of NMRLS, and that time I can't recall for sure. It may have started under Emmanuel Smith as our director, or it might have been Leonard McClellan. There were some directors during that time for a few years that kind of changed up, and then later Ava Jackson and then Ben Cole, the directors. But I was asked in the beginning to head it up, and I did. And Ava Jackson became the director, I think, around 1990, and she made it it was pretty much a full-time job, although I was also the director of the Administrative Law Project at that time, and reviewed administrative law cases like Social Security disability cases throughout the whole program, and took all the cases to federal court, and many of them on appeal to the appeals council at Social Security. So, but the Elder Law Project became a major component of NMRLS under Ava Jackson, and that's when it, I think, really took off.
And so did you have an interest in elder law as a young lawyer, or was that something that developed through taking on that project?
I think it developed after taking on the project, and in the early years, I came to the program when I was doing some of the same kinds of cases that the legal services was doing in the beginning, the employment discrimination cases for the northern part of the state, and many of the kinds of cases that are just general practice or civil law, such as divorce and bankruptcy and that kind of thing. So when I started going to those meetings, it's when I started getting interested in elder law.
Something that struck me in Dr. Tudor's interview is when she said that 3 out of 4 elders are women. And I thought that was an interesting tie-in to your project. And I wondered if you have any thoughts on any relationship you see there. or if you think elder law has a particular significance, or if elder issues are particularly neglected at times because women are the ones that are predominantly included.
I think in the fact that caregivers are often women, it that is an area that has not had as much emphasis, and the fact that the voice, this is not really totally answering your question, but the voice of the people who often are in need is often coming from someone who has not had a position in society to make their voice heard, and sometimes because they have some form of dementia, there may be some impediments to them getting their issues out there, that it's difficult to get someone to respond if you can't get a message in, if you can't articulate what the issue is. And I think that often those who are not speaking as loudly, or having an advocate that can help them in this area, articulate their legal needs, it is an impediment. I just had someone remind me of that, because I received an email that was, because I'm volunteering at Legal Services, I still have an email address there, and I got an email that I needed to send on to the call center from someone who was clearly having difficulty articulating. She was able to articulate her stress, but not necessarily that it was a legal issue. And that that often happens because the caregiver in the family was the woman, and then often at that point in their life they're by themselves. And so if the legal services or the Elder Law Project at Legal Services is not made aware of the program, of the problem, then it might not be addressed, because the officials often just see someone who seems to be confused, that often they have gone to several different sources of help. They might have gone to the sheriff. They might have even known somebody in rural Mississippi who knows the judge who they think can address that problem, or they might have been down to the Department of Human Services. There are agencies that they may have approached, but their approach is such that it just appears of somebody that doesn't really have an issue that they can address. And so they haven't articulated it. And I think one of the points that I was trying to make earlier about our advocates, our community advocates, and the paralegals often who were our community workers who were later trained to be paralegals, is that some of their skill that is very important to the access to justice for these women who are older or even younger, frail people who don't have much of a voice is brought about. The help is brought about because these are people who have the skills that can identify the issues, and they're not lawyers, they haven't been through law school, but they have the ability to identify the issues and communicate with the client, so that communication between the client and the lawyer is enhanced. Or it may be the communication between the client and the agency. It may be someone who has elder abuse problems, and they have been reticent about articulating their real problem. They may come over and over again to an agency and articulate it in a different manner because they don't want to say their son is beating them up or their daughter's on drugs and taking all their money and they're hungry. And they just come and say they're hungry and, are there any programs? So often the advocates in the community who are, and the women who are social workers in those, in the community program and later became paralegals, had the enhanced, I guess, ability to interview and get the issue out that needs to be addressed so that the lawyer can then address the issue, which is not exactly what you asked, but trying to connect the dots.
Oh, that's okay. There may not be an answer to what I asked. So. Well, are there other things that you wanted to lift up, other particular points that you wanted to lift up about this particular project or anything else, really?
See, give me just a minute.
And also if anything came up as we were talking, if Morgan had a question, she can jump in too.
I was just going to say, can you talk a little bit about that story that Marion Tudor was discussing, a Medicare Part D example? Is there anything else you can tell us about your take on that work that y'all did?
Well, yes, what occurred there is that Medicare Part D was the prescription drug benefit, and it was rolled out in the mid-90s, I guess. At the same time, the federal government was pushing to try to privatize Medicare, and there were programs or insurance options, private options for receiving basic Medicare, the hospital and doctor benefit, and what are called Medicare Advantage plans. Part C is the Medicare Advantage plan. It's the ability to you can enroll with a private insurance group and receive the same benefits you do with your Medicare card, but sometimes there are extra costs, but you can also get extra things covered. And those plans were allowed to partner with or incorporate a prescription plan as well. So when Part D was rolled out in the 1990s, I believe, the Part C plans use the prescription hook, drug coverage hook to get people away from traditional Medicare into these plans. And the plans were not illegal, but they didn't work in rural areas much because, for instance, in Mississippi, there were not very many doctors and hospitals that accepted the Part C plans, the Medicare Advantage plans. But the local insurance agents would find people to entice folks to enroll in these Part C plans. And on using the hook, well, you can get everything in one. You can get your prescription benefit and your doctor and hospital benefit. Plus, you might be able to get some free eyeglasses or, some other hook. And so people in the communities were told you can take this plan anywhere and use it just like you can your Medicare card. Well, you can't if your doctor will not accept the plan. True enough, if all the medical providers accepted the plans, you could do that. So, but people were not given all the information. And then what happened was people died because they would go to the doctor, the same doctor that they would not have gotten a bill from because Medicare, and if they were also eligible for Medicaid, Medicare and Medicaid paid the whole bill. They didn't understand. They would take their Medicare card and give it to the people at the front desk, but then like a month later, they get a bill for 100%. So you may have a 97-year-old client who didn't understand and just stopped going to the doctor. And because they got roped into these plans. So the state agency did a good job, and we were a partner with that in making certain that these insurance agents were giving the full story to people, to getting the word out, and people were also scammed. I mean, they were having situations where people who were comatose in the nursing homes were supposedly had signed up for Medicare Advantage, and so we were, particularly myself and my law students. I had the elder law clinic at the time, and we were on the phone just about for a couple of semesters, getting people out of those plans. And if you had someone who could stay on the phone with Medicare with you, you could get disenrolled and get back into traditional Medicare if you had been scammed. But you really had to have an advocate to have that done. And while we were doing that on the front lines, the state was shutting down the scam artists, the insurance agents. And the reason they would do that is they got like $600 a pop payments, commissions for going into a neighborhood and signing up everybody on the street. So for the Medicare Advantage plans, they didn't get that kind of commission just for the standalone prescription drug plan. So it was really confusing because the prescription plans, drug plans, are also handled by private insurance. You might have Humana this year, next year you might have Aetna, but you have to have some kind of insurance plan to get your Medicare Part D prescription benefit each year. But you don't have to sign up for the hospital benefit and the doctor benefit in the with the insurance agents. You can continue to get that through traditional Medicare, which is the government program, through the federal agency. So people were confused because they got sucked into this option, simply thinking they had to have that to get their prescription plan. Then they lost all their health care. And it didn't happen. It wasn't a scam everywhere. I mean, some of the larger cities had enough providers in the Part C networks that they worked well for some people. And I don't know, they may work better now. We certainly don't see the kind of, in Mississippi, we don't see the kind of complaints, but I think part of that is because they shut down the scam artists who were dealing with it. And they did that during Dr. Tudor's time. She was an excellent director of the Division of Aging. So it was myself and the law students in the northern part of the state who did that work.
Ginny, also just take a look back at your work with starting the Elder Law Project and all you accomplished, and what are some of the things you're most proud of?
I think the model itself is, I think it worked well, and we were enhanced by the level of leadership at the state level, and also the fact that your local area agencies on aging are by and large very dedicated workers who worked in tandem with us. And I think the thing that I was able to do is establish those networks of communication with the state and with the local area agencies on aging staff, the Medicaid waiver workers. They were the ones who went into and still do go into the homes and assess whether somebody needs Medicaid long-term care, if they can have it delivered to the house. Those were frontline workers who were social workers and nurses, and sometimes even nursing home administrators and nursing home social workers in hospitals, nurses. We developed a network of people, and these professionals, this interagency approach to the practice of law, these were, I guess now after 9/11, we call them first responders. These are people who are on the scene. The elderly person who can barely get around or talk in the home might whisper something to the home health nurse about their nephew is trying to sell their house. Or they want to make sure their house goes to the disabled son who's living with them and not to their drug addicted older daughter who's trying to get them to sign a deed, that kind of thing. And so these first responders, I knew them personally. We got calls from the area agency people, from the social workers in the institutions for the elderly, for people, home health nurses, even from the sheriff, whoever. And so establishing the network in the community of people who are in touch with frail elderly and isolated elderly was one of the things I think I did for the program and for the client community. Because these are people often who are not going to call the call center. They may not, their overbearing relative may not let them use the phone. You may have to sit with them for an hour to get them to clear their mind a little bit so they can tell you what their problem is. They got to that point with the home health worker who called you and could concisely set out what the problem is, and then you could send a law student, or you can go with the law student to the house, or find out when you can go there and the person won't be alone. So these are time-consuming, in-person things that needed to be done in 39 counties, and I set it up in a way, I think, so that we can interact together, and often the work can get done in the community sometimes without us actually going out. We get on the phone, we find somebody locally if it was something that had to be done before we could get there. But often, we go into the community as much as we could with the students, and that model still, as you know, still exists. So I think that's because of the rural, isolated nature of the state. I think that was very important. Many elderly people didn't have a chance to go to school, are illiterate or may read and write at the 4th grade level, not able to, like the average person calling in about a divorce is going to be younger. They're going to be able to very articulately tell you everything that's going on in their marriage, And these are people who are under the models that are set forth in, I guess, in the Beltway in Washington. It's more accessible for younger people. And I think even though some people think, everything ought to go through the call center, I think the frail people and the isolated people and the people with some level of disability often do need that hands-on help from the legal services. And I think I helped put that together. And also the Elder Law Conference, which is still going strong. I think has been a big help to the professionals. And the other thing is this interdisciplinary approach to the practice of law that I think, I didn't call it that then, but I think that's what we were doing. It's now recognized, it's something that, there are things that are set up now throughout the country that involve interdisciplinary practice of law. The area of elder abuse, there are models throughout the country. For instance, that there will be people who will come around the table from the health department, the legal services, the law enforcement, and in some areas they actually find ways to accommodate the privacy issues and still try to come with a solution for cases in their community from an interdisciplinary approach. And so I think this is sort of it was a wave of the past, but it's also a wave of the future, particularly since the Bar Association, I don't know, I read I think Forbes magazine article one time that claimed that the bar associations are passe now because people are going on the internet and getting their wills or whatever, and that 8 out of 10 businesses cannot afford. They have a lawyer help with even the business matters. So that the bar associations have been accused of having too formalistic definition of what the practice of law consists of, I guess, and that the access to legal assistance is changing, every day because of the technology and the unbundling, I guess, of different kinds of services. And this is in line with, I guess, what I've been talking about with the assistance that lawyers have gotten throughout, the time of legal services as they existed here, from non-lawyers who have carried a lot of the load to bring people to access to justice.
Sounds good. That's all I have.
Okay, well,
April,
thank you
do
very
have
much.
anything else?
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't think of anything else right now. I may after we get off, but Jenny, was there anything else in your notes that you wanted to make sure you wanted to cover?
Let me look this one. I think that about covers it.
Okay. Well, that was excellent.
Thank you.
Very good information.
That was great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and let us know when you get something else scheduled.
Yep.
Okay. And I guess, Morgan, you'll let me know when I might have some videos from what we did today and in June.
Yeah. So do you want the ones from today? You want me to put those on that hard drive too?
Sure.
Okay.
So what is on the hard drive?
Right now, it's the old interviews from the 50th anniversary conference. And I think the sound, we still need to work on the sound, but it's not, I mean, it's about like the sound on the new interview. So, if you can hear those, you can hear these. They're not cleaned up or anything, but you can still go through and get clips. So it's all of the ones, it's everything from the 2016 conference.
Okay, wonderful.
So I'll put these on there. I think there's room. I mean, I'm sure there is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my thought, as I've been listening to the other videos from 2019, I think that I can come with enough suggestions for us to put together, our summer thing,
Okay.
12 to 13 minute, whatever,
Okay.
video. So I was thinking I might not need to, unless I can get Alvin Chambliss. And the other person who was suggested by Ben was Connie Slaughter. So I don't know if that's a possibility. And she did, I guess, work in some capacity in the early years with legal services. And since he suggested it, I thought I'd make a run at it.
Okay.
So she also spoke at the on Skype at the first kickoff. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, okay. So when was that, Jenny? The kickoff was not the conference?
Well, no, it was before the conference in January, where you didn't.
I think we might have been there too. I thought there was another event. Do you think, did we interview people then? Or did we film it?
I'm not sure you filmed it.
Okay. But that was in January of 2016, the kickoff of
Yeah.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
I need to search and just see. Okay. But I mean, her name does not ring a bell, so I'm pretty sure we don't have her recorded. But I just thought we might have pictures or something, but I'll look into it.
Yeah. I think that we did not record that, and afterward I was really sorry we didn't.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, because John Bradley also gave a really good presentation.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And Justice Dickinson was there, made some comments, and some others. So
Okay.
it's really was our fault. We didn't think about getting it recorded until the next one.
Right. Okay. Well, I will get you that stuff on the hard drive then.
And so, do you have a deadline that you need me to give my suggestions?
Well, not really. We're probably not going to be able to start working on the 13-minute video until probably mid-August. So we need to have it done by the end of August, right? Okay.
Okay. So I got a few weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I think the main thing is just maybe shoot for August 3rd. Let's try to shoot for having it, your ideas by August 3rd. So that maybe I can help find some of those things before we actually start putting it together.
So when I find what I think would be good, April, do you think it would be worth while for me to have you look at them and see whether you thought that would be a good clip or not? Kind of.
Sure. Depending on length, I have to be realistic about how much time I have. So, I don't think I could look at, hours and hours of footage, but if it was pretty succinct and like, here are the ones. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've been trying to, I'm not sure that I'm as good as you and Roy, but, trying to find like within a couple of minutes what it is. And y'all were really good. I guess, Morgan, you had to work with what we sent you, but
yeah, it was great.
I think they were pretty good about finding.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I think I'm understanding the process. So I'm trying to look at my outline and find what looks to me like might go with it.
Yeah.
And maybe we can try to figure out if there's some other photographs or something that we.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Let's try to get some pictures. Okay, good. Yeah, that sounds good. So I will get you the hard drive, and then as soon as we get some clips, we'll just start going fast as we can.
So you just let me know when you want to bring the hard drive.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Sounds
Thank
good.
y'all.
Thank y'all. Have a good day.
Yeah, have a great
Bye.
weekend.
You
Thanks.
too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.